So about a week ago, I put up a tier list ranking all of the current Adidas top-end models and some of the takedowns, and asked you guys if you'd like to see more tier lists. A lot of you guys said yes, and a lot of you guys recommended that I do a Nike tier list, but I realized that I would do the Nike tier list and then eventually you guys would say, oh, do Puma and do this brand and do that brand. So I figured I'd just do all the brands in one video and just do kind of an ultimate football boot tier list thing. So that's what we're gonna do. You've probably seen a tier list video on YouTube at this point. I actually really enjoy watching them, and I feel like the tier list system is actually a really good way of ranking football boots. So this video will include Nike, Adidas, Puma, Mizuno, New Balance, Umbro, Under Armour, and Lotto, all ranked in tiers. And again, keep in mind, I'll be ranking only the top end models. I should also mention that I'm only gonna be ranking the football boots that I have personally worn because I feel like that's only fair. And also keep in mind that all of these ranks are based on my own personal opinion. You might have a different opinion, and if you do, feel free to express it down below in the comments. If you guys do end up enjoying this video and perhaps would like to see more tier list videos of other football boots or football related products, don't forget to support this one with a like. And if you're new here watching for the first time and don't want to miss out on daily content from me, don't forget to hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification so you get notified when the next new video goes live. I should also mention that I have changed some of the ranks for the Adidas boots in comparison to the other tier list video that I made, and that's simply because when I compare them to everything on the market versus just the other Adidas boots, changes things a little bit. Nike is currently one of, if not the most popular football boot brands in the world right now, and their top end lineup at the moment is actually a lot smaller than it's been over the last couple of years, but as they say, quality over quantity, and that I think is really what describes Nike's current lineup. They're very, very well balanced across the board in terms of maintaining a very high quality standard. The Nike Tiempo Legend 7 Elite. When you're talking about a top-end football boot with a kangaroo leather upper, this has the best performance characteristics of anything. The lockdown is phenomenal. The responsiveness is really, really good. The traction is excellent. It's lightweight. It's extremely comfortable. Plus you get kangaroo leather. The only gripe that I have with this boot is that the kangaroo leather touch that you get isn't as amazing as some other kangaroo leather boots that we're going to be talking about in this video. So for that reason alone, it's A tier. The Nike Mercurial Vapor 12 and Superfly 6 Elite that I am lumping together as one boot on this tier list because they are effectively the same thing. One has a collar, one does not. That's the only difference here. And I think most people would agree that these are two of the best speed boots on the market right now. They do everything from a performance standpoint extremely well, responsive, tight fitting, very aggressive traction. I'm realizing now that I'm describing these very similarly to the Tiempos, but they do everything that I talked about on the Tiempos better because they are the true speed boot from the Nike brand. The only gripe that a lot of people have with this boot, kind of including myself, is that it does stray a little bit away from the original recipe that made the Mercurial so special, especially when it comes to the Vapor, because it's now a Flyknit upper rather than a thin Tasian synthetic. They're very, very good boots. You're not going to be unhappy with them, but they can't be S tier, which is why they're A tier. The Nike Phantom Vision Elite is a boot that I'm personally a huge fan of, and I think features currently the most impressive technology within the Nike football boot brand, and that is the internal quad fit system. That's not super impressive to the general public because it's not actually something that you can see, but from a comfort and fit standpoint, it really does make the Phantom Vision stand out in comparison to everything on the market. However, the upper is fairly unextraordinary. It's just a Flyknit base with some heavy texturing, which feels good, but there's nothing that interesting about it. It has the most unnecessary collar in the football boot industry and simply doesn't need to be there. And as far as sole plates and stud patterns go, while this is great, it's nice and lightweight, it feels fine, and the traction is okay, it's probably the worst layout from the Nike brand in comparison to everything. So for that reason, while I think it's a solid boot, it's B tier. The Nike Phantom Venom, which is the unofficial Hypervenom Phantom 4 because it replaced the Phantom 3, and it's also the spiritual successor to the Nike T90 line because of the striking element that it introduced. So it is kind of unofficially the return of power boots for Nike and really for the football boot industry. It's also an excellent pair of football boots. It pretty much does everything really, really well, kind of like the Mercurial Vapor 12 Elite. I think that's the closest comparison within the Nike brand, but unlike the Vapor, the thin Flyknit upper actually has a soft, comfortable feel to it, but you still get all the lockdown benefits and aggressive traction. So for that reason alone, plus the addition of a striking element that feels great when hitting the ball, I really do feel like this is an S-tier boot. And finally, the Nike Premier 2, which technically isn't a top-end model, but because it's Nike's answer to the Copa Mundial, a boot that I will be including on this tier list as well, I figured it was only fair to include. For $110, from a value for money perspective, this is one of the best options on the market, period. The kangaroo leather, you get a good amount of it. It's decent quality considering the price. The sole plate and stud pattern is old school and I think fitting of what is a very simple design. They're comfortable boots, and in comparison to something like a Copa Mundial that has a very old school fit and feel, this is much more modern in terms of how it fits your foot and pretty much requires no break-in time whatsoever. It's a really solid option, certainly not the best performer. It's B tier. I changed my mind, it's C tier. Adidas, similar to Nike, is a gigantic football boot brand, but unlike Nike, they offer a ton of variety at top-end price points, some high highs and some lower lows, so there's definitely more variation in terms of overall quality, but the fact that they offer as much variety as they do is something that I definitely appreciate, sort of. The Adidas X19 Plus, the latest laceless speed boot from the Adidas brand, that's a huge improvement over the previous model, but it still suffers from the typical issues that you get with a lot of laceless football boots, and that is the overall fit and the lockdown, which are the two weakest areas of this boot, and two areas that are very important when you're talking about a boot that fits into the speed category. There are just better options when it comes to fit and responsiveness. However, the touch is great. The stud pattern is great. They're nice and lightweight. I have to be honest that if this boot had a lacing system, it would be A, maybe even S tier. I think they're that good. But as it is right now, this is a B tier boot. The Adidas X19.1, which is the laced option in the current X lineup, that features great lockdown, a great fit overall, a speed mesh upper that's very soft, has a little bit more padding than I think most people would expect from a speed boot, certainly in comparison to a pair of Mercurials. The traction is good, it's lightweight, it's a very well-rounded product, and one of my personal favorite speed boots on the market right now. Because it doesn't have many flaws, it's A tier. The Copa 19 Plus, to say the least, is a special pair of football boots. If you're somebody that has tried a ton of boots over your lifetime, you kind of come to realize that the ones that stand out are the ones that provide a unique experience, and that is exactly how I would describe the Copa 19 Plus. It is the only boot that I'll be talking about in this video that feels anything like this. The focus of the boot is the super thin, super soft kangaroo leather that is uninterrupted by any kind of laces. Yes, it's a laceless boot and I really like them. There are issues with the fit, there are issues with the lockdown, but I can live with it given the style of boot that it is. It's not super tight, it's not super responsive, but it doesn't need to be because it's kind of offering you that old school leather sensation. There's a knitted component to the midfoot as well as the heel area for the sake of lockdown. That's how the laceless system works. And I have to be honest in saying that I'm not a huge fan of the sole plate or the stud pattern, but the feel of the upper, the touch on the ball, the experience of this boot is unlike anything else currently available, which is why it's S tier. And then there's the Copa 19.1, which is just an okay football boot. Its main competitor would be the Tiempo Legend 7 Elite from Nike, and in comparison to that boot, it matches up with it in a lot of different areas. The tightness through the midfoot does make these quite responsive. You could make the argument that the leather quality is maybe a little bit better on the Copa 19.1, although you do get less of it in comparison to the Tiempos. I think the fit and overall design of the tongue is far worse in comparison to the Tiempos. They're not quite as light, and again, not a huge fan of the sole plate and stud pattern. They're certainly not bad football boots, but I don't think that they're anything extraordinary. It's C tier. The Adidas Predator 19 Plus really is a solid pair of football boots, but there's really nothing special about it in any given area. The knitted upper is soft, it's flexible, it gives you that sock-like sensation, and it's actually remarkably thin considering that this is a Predator. You'd probably expect something a little bit more padded. The laceless system is basically just exposed elasticated Flyknit, so the lockdown, in my opinion, is not all that great. If responsiveness is what you're after, a nice, tight, secure fit, these are probably not for you. The sole plate and stud pattern is probably my least favorite from the Adidas brand, and the incorporation of boosts in the insole as well as the extra layer they put in the forefoot sounds like a great idea, but really just feels like a regular insole, so who really cares anyways? It's one of those boots where it's not the best knitted upper, it's not the best laceless upper, it's not the best sole plate or stud pattern, it's not particularly lightweight. I don't think it's the most comfortable either. It's just not a boot that's extraordinary in any way whatsoever. So for that reason, it's D tier. And then the Predator 19.1 is basically just the 19 Plus at a slightly lower price, which is good. It adds on a lacing system, which improves all of the fit and lockdown issues, which is also good. And then it eliminates the boost element that you find in the insole, which is not something that you're going to notice whatsoever. It's better than the 19 Plus, but still nothing that special if you ask me, which is why it's C tier. Man, there's so many Adidas boots. The Adidas Nemesis 19 Plus is a very weird looking pair of football boots with an extremely ambitious design that for the most part works out. Its laceless design is not incredible in terms of overall lockdown, although again, like a lot of laceless football boots, that's going to vary from person to person, although I do think that the tension tape they've incorporated could do with having a little bit more tension. The feel of the upper, however, is really, really good. It's soft, it's flexible, it has a great thin barefoot feel on the ball. The split sole design I think looks quite good. The sole plate feels really good. It's got a very much improved stud pattern in comparison to the previous generation Nemesis, but obviously the look is going to be something that you either love or hate. It's a solid pair of football boots, certainly not the best when it comes to overall performance, which is why it's C tier. The Adidas Nemesis 19.1 is, in my opinion, the best Nemesis boot to date. It's kind of like a design variation of the X19.1 in that the two boots incorporate a lot of the same elements, a very thin barefoot feel to the upper, these arguably being a little bit thinner than what you get from the X19.1, a lightweight construction, a tight responsive feel, aggressive traction. It has a lot of speed boot elements, even though this technically isn't a speed boot. In some ways it's better than the X, in some ways the X is a little bit better, so it is a matter of personal opinion, but it's a very solid boot nonetheless. It's A tier. The Adidas Copa Mundial is S tier. And then there's the Adidas Glitch 2.0, which isn't readily available to everyone in the world, but if you do have access to it, just know that it's an okay pair of football boots with a cool concept, but ultimately a pair of boots that is quite heavy in comparison to pretty much every modern boot that I'm talking about in this video. It fits just okay, the touch is just okay, and everything about this boot is just okay. So if you like the concept, I guess go for it, but for me, this is a D tier football boot. Puma, also known as Puma, is the third place brand, but do they make third place boots? Sort of. The Puma 1 19.1, which yes, I realize is not the current model anymore because Puma just unveiled the 1 5.1 that is not actually available to the public yet, therefore I haven't tried it, therefore I cannot put it on this tier list. Either way, this is a very solid, very underrated pair of football boots, and we're focusing specifically on the kangaroo leather variation. There is technically a synthetic model available in some colorways, I believe, but I would probably avoid those because the leather one is the one to get, no pun intended. The leather is soft, it's flexible. The only gripe that I have with the leather is that there isn't enough of it, but the midfoot is really, really nice in terms of its overall design, being made out of a knitted base with fused overlays. The lacing system is really solid in terms of providing really good lockdown. I think in terms of lockdown, especially through the heel, this is the best in the business. It's a very comfortable pair of football boots. They're nice and lightweight, and the sole plate and stud pattern is also top notch as well. Very solid boot, especially because it's not that popular. You can get them deeply discounted. This is an A tier football boot. The Puma Future 19.1 is another solid football boot, obviously incorporating the signature element of the Puma Future, the net fit system that is no longer a net because this new generation of Future now features a knitted upper that admittedly takes more break-in time than pretty much any other knitted upper ever to exist. There's definitely some firmness and stiffness to it out of the box, but once broken in, it does have a very nice feel to it. I have said before, and I'll say it again, that I do prefer the previous generation Puma Futures with the actual mesh base and the netting material on top in comparison to these, so I don't necessarily feel like this is a huge improvement. Some people do feel that it is, though. It's a matter of personal preference, but as a whole, it's still a very solid boot. The net fit system really allows you for ultimate adjustability in terms of giving you kind of a slightly customized fit because you have the ability to put the laces exactly where you want them, which does actually make a difference. And then the sole plate and stud pattern is one of my personal favorite on the market as well. It's a great boot, but it does have its issues. It's B tier. Mizuno is a brand that has really built themselves on reputation. Everybody understands that Mizuno makes the best quality football boots on the market, both in terms of build as well as quality of materials. They're also a brand that's very no-nonsense in terms of how they do their boots. They don't make changes for the sake of change, and they know exactly what their customers want, and for the most part, they give them exactly that. The Made in Japan Mizuno Morelia 2 is an incredible pair of football boots. It gives you everything that's amazing about the Copa Mundial, but with modern technology that you don't necessarily see, but you can definitely feel. Unlike a pair of Copas, this has a modern shape to it. So immediately when you put them on, they feel incredible on your feet. The sole plate and stud pattern might look old school, but it utilizes modern plastics, and it makes these boots as light as any top-end model currently available, believe it or not. These are remarkably light football boots, plus the kangaroo leather you get across the entire upper is as good as it gets, as you'll find with any Made in Japan Mizuno products. Yes, they're expensive, but trust me when I say that they're worth it if you're into this style of football boot. No questions asked, this is S tier. The Made in Japan Mizuno Rebula 2 V1 is a great pair of football boots, but it's not without its flaws. In terms of what's wrong, I think that the shape needs to be modified ever so slightly. There are some things that could be improved in that area, and for whatever reason, especially through the heel, there seems to be some minor issues with discomfort during the break-in process. So those are some things to be aware of. I also have to say that I'm not crazy about the sole plate and stud pattern. It's not that it's bad, but there's nothing that interesting about it. The leather and the overall quality of the boot, however, is phenomenal. The kangaroo leather is super thin, but it features this unique control frame internal kind of memory foam construction that really gives it this weird dampened sensation. And I say weird in the best way possible because the touch on the ball is really good. It's got an off-center lacing system that runs nice and deep, which is kind of a signature of the Mizuno brand. So once you have them on your feet, once they've been broken in a little bit because the leather will stretch as you wear them, the fit and wrap around your foot that you're able to achieve is really solid. It's not that it's a bad pair of boots, but it's not up to the same standard as most other Mizuno products, I would say, in terms of overall comfort. So for that reason, it's C tier. The Made in Japan Mizuno Morelia Neo 2 is a near perfect pair of football boots with one area where I think they could improve, and that is the material through the midfoot. It's a thin synthetic that's nice and soft. It's very flexible. There's nothing bad about it, but it could be better. I'd like to see them do something a little bit different. Other than that, the kangaroo leather you get at the toe is super thin. The boots as a whole are extremely lightweight. The touch on the ball is really good. They're remarkably comfortable despite how light they are, this being one of the lightest boots on the market right now. And the sole plate and stud pattern is top notch. Yes, this looks kind of traditional with all conical studs, but trust me when I say that the traction that you get here is more aggressive than you might expect. This is truly one of, if not the best speed boots on the market right now. A little bit expensive, but again, you get what you pay for from a quality standpoint. The Neo 2 is A tier. New Balance is a brand that has evolved a lot over the last several years. Some of the boots they've had have been really good, but they've also provided some of the worst boots that I've honestly ever worn. In terms of their current lineup, it is as good as it has ever been, but could definitely still improve. The New Balance Tequila V1 Pro is one of my personal favorite football boots, but it does have its flaws when it comes to fit as well as lockdown. It is a wider fitting boot, and it does have a little bit of sloppiness to the upper. It's not structurally sound, and that's mainly down to the fact that it has a very short lacing system that sits very high up the foot. So the majority of your forefoot, as well as the entire toe box area, really doesn't have any added structure to help hold your foot on the base of the sole plate. So there is a little bit of sloppiness in regards to lockdown and responsiveness. I also have heard complaints with heel slippage. I personally don't have any issues, but I have heard people complain about it. And the sole plate and stud pattern, while I appreciate the flexibility of the sole plate, the stud pattern is nothing special whatsoever. But what I really like about this boot is the softness, comfort, and overall touch that you get from this particular upper. It has a kinetic stitch upper, which is basically this base mesh textile type synthetic material with basically stitching running all the way through, almost like a spider web that has this really interesting silicone coating on top. So you get this added structure, you get a soft feel, you get a very natural sensation, and you also get that little bit of added grip that I'm personally a huge fan of. It's a great pair of football boots, but again, probably not for everybody, which is why I think it's B tier. The New Balance Furon V5 Pro, which I think is by far the best speed boot ever to come out of the New Balance brand, and certainly the best Furon model to date. It features an upper that I think is as good as any speed boot out there in terms of touch as well as overall feel. It's a combination of synthetic materials as well as thin textiles that really make for a nice barefoot feel, really no extra bulk on your foot, and actually decent lockdown with the laces tied tight, although again, it's kind of a questionable choice on a speed boot to go with such a shallow lacing system. The lockdown through the heel is good, but there's not a lot of padding back there, so some discomfort could potentially be an issue for you. And while the sole plate and stud pattern is okay, it's just okay. The traction could be more aggressive, and because of the material it's made out of, the boots as a whole could be a little bit lighter, especially in comparison to the competition. They're not bad, but they're not amazing either. It's a C tier boot. Umbro is one of those brands that's kind of unpredictable. They're all over the place in terms of what they put out. The styling and design of some of their boots is a little bit questionable, but they definitely have put out some solid products lately. The Umbro Medusa 3 Elite being arguably the most interesting of those latest products because it's kangaroo leather and it's laceless. Very similar to the Copa 19 Plus that technically this beat to the punch in that it was unveiled first and technically released first, although the initial release was super limited quantities, like 100 pairs or something like that. Ultimately, the end result, though, is a product that is not as good as a pair of Copa 19 Pluses, if I'm being totally honest with you guys. The kangaroo leather that they've used here is kind of like it's like a foamy type material. I don't know how to describe it exactly. It's not that it's not soft. It's not that it doesn't offer a nice touch on the ball, but it's not typically what you would imagine for a super premium high-end kangaroo leather football boot. It does break in nicely, but it's not amazing. The laceless system is kind of just a laceless upper. There really isn't any added stretch. It's kind of just a predetermined shape that your foot has to fit into in order for proper lockdown, and the lockdown and general fit is just okay. There's nothing that special about the design of the upper. The sole plate and stud pattern is very, very lightweight. This is actually technically the lightest boot on the market, believe it or not, weighing in kind of in the same weight range as of the early 2010 F50 Adi Zeros, which is pretty impressive, but the studs that they've incorporated are remarkably short, which will lead to traction issues if you play on anything that isn't hard ground. So it's a flawed boot in a lot of ways. It's an interesting boot in a lot of ways, but it can't be any higher than C tier. And then there's the laced version, the Umbro Medusa 3 Pro, which still has the same leather upper, obviously incorporates the lacing system, which fixes the fit and lockdown issues. It's still not an overly responsive boot. The leather is still kind of weird, and the studs are still too short. So for those reasons, it's a little bit better. I think it's B tier, but I feel like I'm being generous, so I'm gonna still leave it in C tier. Under Armour, you know, they're not doing a very good job, are they? I think they've had some good boots over the years, but they've really had a hard time establishing themselves in the football boot industry. The Under Armour Magnetico Pro, similar to the Copa 19 Plus, is going to be one of the most unique experiences you'll get from a pair of football boots that is currently available, and that the upper is paper thin. If you want to play in football boots that feel like you're not wearing any football boots on your feet, like you're truly barefoot, this is exactly what you want. It's also remarkably comfortable considering how thin it is. It has no plasticky sensation to it whatsoever. It's not the most responsive boot. They're surprisingly not actually that light considering how thin the upper is, and the sole plate and stud pattern is just okay. It's also got some durability issues. I personally never broke a pair, but I have seen plenty of people complaining about it, so it's something to be aware of. I don't think that they're bad football boots, but I don't think that it's what most people are looking for because of how thin they are. It's actually borderline dangerous. This boot is C tier. And then there's the Under Armour Spotlight, which recently saw an update where they removed the zipper. I have those, but I'm not going to show you them because that's no fun. So here's the zipper boot. Obviously, this failed for obvious reasons. They put a zipper on a football boot to close up a lace cover. The zipper has nothing to do with performance. It has nothing to do with anything other than just having a zipper on a pair of football boots, with Under Armour somehow thinking that this was going to be a good idea and appeal to a large audience. It did not. It failed so badly they had to change the design, and even the new design is still something that's not that appealing. They're not bad football boots by any means, but again, there's legitimately nothing special about these that would make you buy an Under Armour boot over other big brands. So for that reason, the Spotlight, the refresh Spotlight, is D tier. This version is Z tier. The Lotto brand is a childhood favorite of mine and really doesn't get the credit that it deserves for how much it innovated in the football boot industry through the 90s as well as the early 2000s, Lotto being the brand that's responsible for the original laceless football boot, which is obviously what the Adidas brand is now all about. And they seem to be making a comeback. The Lotto Stadio 45 is a made in Italy budget leather football boot that features leather that you can only get from Lotto. It's thin, it's soft, it's flexible. It just has that feel of a pair of classic Lotto football boots that if you've never had a pair, I can't really describe it to you. You kind of have to try it for yourself. Certainly not the most responsive boots, certainly not overly lightweight, but the build quality is really, really good. And for the money, you definitely can't go wrong. It's kind of like an Italian Nike Premier 2 that you could argue is better and worse in certain ways, but for me, this is a B-tier football boot. The Lotto Maestro 200 is arguably the best football boot on the market that absolutely nobody seems to know about. It features a mesh base upper that is reminiscent of the Nike skin found on the original Hypervenom Phantom 1, a boot that is regarded by many people as their all-time favorite. Features a central lacing system that runs nice and deep, so you're able to achieve a really good fit and great overall lockdown. It has this cool kind of one-piece enclosure with the tongue design, standard low-cut construction, lockdown is really solid, the sole plate and stud pattern is top-notch, lightweight, flexible, solid traction as well, and you can get all of this for a price point of around $100. So definitely can't go wrong if you're on a budget or you're just looking to try something different in your next pair of top-end boots. Not the best boot on the market, but certainly far from the worst. It's B tier. The Joma Champion Max. It's J tier. And there you have it, every single top-end football boot currently available ranked on a tier list. If you guys enjoyed this video, please don't forget to support it with a like. That helps me out tremendously. If you're interested in any of the football boots that were talked about in this video, there's a link down below in the description where you can go and buy them with some exclusive SR4U coupon codes so you can get them below their normal retail prices. If you have any questions or any rankings of your own that you'd like to share with the world, leave all of that down below in the comments and I'll do my best to get an answer out to you as soon as I possibly can. If you're not subscribed already, be sure to hit that subscribe button along with the little bell notification so you get notified when the next new video goes live. All my social media information is linked down below as well, so follow me there if you don't already. And other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. I'm gonna lose my voice.